The Ringbahn. On paper, or more realistically Google Maps, it's the train that winds itself around Berlin in the shape of man's best friend, earning it the nickname Hundekopf, or Dog's Head. This train connects the city's multitude of core neighborhoods. Without it, Berlin would be a hodgepodge of disconnected enclaves, like neighbors you know exist but mostly ignore. And when I say connects, I don't just mean in the literal sense. I'm talking symbolically, or even spiritually if that's your jam. Simply put, the Ringbahn is the only thing that makes Neukölln, Schöneberg, and Prenzlauer Berg feel like they're actually part of the same hedonistic, chaotic, yet strangely quiet city. It's what makes Berlin, east and west, one. Access to trains like the Ringbahn was one of the main reasons I wanted to move to Europe in the first place, trading in the destructive highway ribbons of my native land for rails that make you feel like you're part of the city rather than trying to avoid it. Now, as much as I enjoy riding the Ringbahn, I started to wonder what it would be like to run the Ringbahn, all 37.5 kilometers of it. What better way to see the different patches of quilt the Ringbahn stitches together than to make like the Bahn and run around the ring myself? Lucky for me, I'm not the first person who had this thought. Annie Voigt is an adventure writer and athlete living right off the Ringbahn. Back in 2021, she and her brother patched together a marathon route following the Ringbahn as best as possible on city roads and park paths.
So in 2020, I ran a 1,000-kilometer ultramarathon. So I was really into the fastest known time, the website, the concept, and I was also really into running. And I wanted to do a project with my brother, and fastest known time does allow for teams to send in a run. And I've always wanted to do the full Ringbahn. When I moved to Berlin, I wanted to do a full run of the Ringbahn sitting in the actual S-Bahn. And then after a couple of years, I realized I'm never going to do this. Like, I've never done the full loop of the Ringbahn, but I'm fit enough to run it. So I convinced my brother, and we did it kind of like a sibling bonding adventure. And it was just this ridiculous thing where we ran around the Ringbahn once, and I decided to upload it to fastestknowntime.com. I think it's this iconic thing that is just in everybody's lives. Like, the Ringbahn is the most consistent thing out there. The Ringbahn to me is something, is this almost like an idea. The world can end and the Ringbahn just keeps on running. And that's why I really wanted to do it. Also because I wanted to see all of Berlin. The Ringbahn is just this perfect snapshot of this entire city. Like, it gives you a feel for each of the different neighborhoods. And that's what I really, really like about this route, because Berlin is extremely diverse. You've got all these tiny little towns, more or less, in one big conglomerate together, making a big city.
The more I looked into this route and the history of the Ringbahn itself, the more I saw it as a reflection of Berlin and Germany as a nation. So while I run this thing, Johnny Whitlam here is going to take a break from one of his wildly fascinating tours that you should definitely sign up for if you're visiting, and tell you in 4 parts the history of the Ringbahn and how that history is a reflection of Berlin's own, to say the least, tumultuous history.
Guten Morgen. So heading up to the start to run the Berliner Hundekopf around the S-Bahn. I'm going to be meeting my good friend Judson up there, who's kindly agreed to don some lycra and bike around, not to support me. It's very important for the FKT, but to film, to get some shots of me going by and help put this thing together. I have this strange urge, like I gotta get to the start by 7:45 so that I can start running right at 8, as if there's gonna be a gun and somebody actually starting this thing. Really, I'm on my own schedule, but I do want to get going because this is an urban run, and from what I've read, there's going to be a lot of red lights possibly, and hopefully by running early in the morning, because Berlin tends to sleep in, hopefully by running early in the morning, we're going to avoid some traffic, and we can keep moving and get this FKT. Does that look Dr. Mutzi to you?
It does.
Dr. Mutzi. All right, starting. And here we go.
There you go.
Choosy. Alright, I am underway with the Berliner Hundekopf run. Feeling like I'm going to be regretting this Doppelmützen situation, but you know, what the hell. Running in Berlin. Ich bin ein Berliner. Gotta embrace it, I guess.
Speaking of embracing, that's precisely what Berlin did when it came to trains. Over to you, Johnny.
At the beginning of the 19th century, in the midst of the Industrial Revolution, humanity invented the train. The first train connected Berlin to Potsdam in the year 1838. It was a big success, and here in Berlin they decided to build more and more trains, but not how we know them today. They put them literally on the streets where cars would go today, and they gave them a ridiculously German name, the Königliche Bahnhofsverbindungsbahn. The trains were on the streets, they were loud, they were dirty, they were smelly, they were dangerous, and then they built more. So they were louder and more dirty and more dangerous. And so the people of Berlin, Prussia, they decided, this is too much. We've got to move the trains to the edge of the city, not least because Berlin was becoming a major manufacturing city. This made it very practical for moving people, but also goods around. To build a big train line, you need quite a bit of money, and that money just appeared in 1866 as a result of the Prussian-Austrian War, or the Austro-Prussian War, which Prussia won, as they used to do in the 19th century. So they got a bit of cash and they spent it all making the Ringbahn, a circular train line that was opened kind of in 1871 in the summer. It's the same year that Germany became an empire. I say kind of because they only opened a stretch of it at that time, quite a big stretch, but it didn't become a full circle, a full ring, until 1877. You know, most people ride the train around the Ringbahn. I've never heard of anything so stupid as getting up at 6:30 in the morning, putting on Ampelman socks, wearing a little hat, strapping cameras to yourself, and running for 37 kilometers in a circle where there isn't really a proper path anyway. Sounds like a huge effort for really not much return. Anyway, it's now been carrying people all the way around Berlin for, oh gosh, just around 150 years now.
Anybody who's going by is gonna think, is that somebody? Yeah, and I wish there was a way to instantly correct and be like, no, it's absolutely nobody. Joking on the job. So although this is just a race with myself, or somebody who's run this before, I have come out of the gates like this is actually a race. And I felt, oh, I feel great. This will go by no time. Just checked my watch, we're 17 minutes in. So I think I need to tone it down a notch. Thank you, Mr. Ampelman. I don't want to jinx it too early, but I think there's the Force in the Star Wars universe. I think the Ampelman is on my side. I think the Ampelman is working in my favor. I think this ends up being a tour through Berlin Memory Lane as I just run by the Vereinwanderung, but I didn't say they were good memories. Thank God I'm done with that place, for the most part. If you're watching this, let's approve that application for citizenship ASAP, please. Okay, maybe this is the climb of the Ringbahn. Also with these gates, kind of makes me think the train might be verboten. That would be a hell of a way to ruin my citizenship application. Getting a fine or arrest doing something that I think is pretty f***ing Berliner. There comes a car.
Bye. See you next time.
Yeah. Well, that was a thing.
It turned out to be more than a thing. But more on that later.
Alright, well, on the plus side, I was able to roll on through. On the downside, we've lost Judson. In terms of being together for the run, he's still with us in a spiritual sense. If I'm not mistaken, we have entered the grounds for Schloss Schlettenberg. We're a little over 14 kilometers in. I can tell I'm going to be feeling this. And also haven't seen Judson since we parted ways. So I wouldn't say getting worried, but sure would be nice to see that ginger face.
Anyone who's lived in or spent any amount of time in Berlin knows that there are constant physical reminders of the devastation brought on by World War II and the Nazi dictatorship. It's impossible to get through any conversation about Berlin and German history without mentioning them, even in a silly little running film about the Ringbahn.
And so the Ringbahn's a 19th century invention, but obviously it then exists in 20th century Germany, which, as we know, gets a little bit rocky. Germany's train infrastructure was hugely important during the First World War, a war that was fought on two fronts, right? Sending people, stuff, weapons over to Russia, but also over to France. And as the capital and as a huge manufacturing center, the trains here and the Ringbahn here was hugely important. It did survive the war because World War I didn't come to Berlin in a way that World War II did. And that means that we're going into the 1930s and 40s and that we should talk about the Nazi dictatorship and talk about what happened with the trains here during that time. Now, it was the Allies' express plan in World War II to drop huge amounts of bombs over German cities, including Berlin, the targets being military, civilian, and of course, infrastructure as well. The trains were hit, and actually if you ride the Ringbahn today, you can still see evidence of this incredibly dark time. Next to Gesundbrunnen station, there's a giant flak tower where there was a massive anti-aircraft installation that defended Berlin. However, quite near to Gesundbrunnen, there's another station, Westhafen. And if you exit the station there on the rail bridge, you'll see that there's a memorial for tens of thousands of Jews that were taken to a freight railway station there, where they were sadly deported. In the final 4 years of the Nazi dictatorship, roughly 50,000 Jews were deported from Berlin alone. They were sent to the concentration camps in the east, where, more than likely, they would have been killed.
Just past the halfway mark of this here Hundekopf run in the Ringbahn we trust. Feeling fine, I guess. But you know, first 22 don't matter if you can't nail the last 22. Put that on a poster with a cat or something hanging from a limb.
But passing the halfway point wasn't the only thing giving me a little extra wind in my sails. So what happened with the Westhafen authorities? Future Judson explains.
Okay, so somewhere around kilometer 10, we're going through this industrial plex full of shipping containers and kind of a port of entry on the north side of Berlin. And there's like a gate that stops cars from going in, but we're easily able to just go right around it as on foot and on bike. And we go through, it's empty, it's nice. There's a security car that passed us, didn't give us any problems. And we get to the other end of the route coming through this place, and there's a gate closed, like you can't go through. Joe here, being an individual person that he is, was able to take off his backpack and just shimmy underneath this gate, and then get his backpack back and continue running so that his route wasn't interfered with. But I, on a bike, could not do the same. And so I said, okay, yeah, no problem. I'll just ride back around to the entrance. It's not that far, and I'll catch you. The last thing Joe said to me, as he looked over my shoulder past towards the direction that we had come, is, oh, here comes a car. Bye. So the car was a security car coming back, and as I'm putting the cameras back together in the backpack and everything to then ride as quickly as I can out of that place and around to catch Joe further down the track, the security guard is coming up to me, getting out of the car and saying, hey, what are you doing here? You're not allowed to be here. All this stuff. Polite enough, but also not very enthused not as enthused as I was for my being there. And in the end, he had me follow him back to the security control office and talk to his boss. And this took a while, and I was pretty afraid that I was going to be met by police or something like that. And it didn't turn out like this. They were very nice, but very stern and wanting me to understand that I was in a place where I was not allowed to be, and that if I wanted to film there, I needed to have permission. And they told me all the information what I needed to do next time, and then had me delete all the footage that we had taken. And then I got out of there easy enough. The whole episode was probably 10 minutes, start to finish. And by the time I got out of there and looked up where's Joe now? Where do I need to get to? He was already like across Berlin. My trying to catch him meant I basically just had to go from the northernmost side of the route to the southernmost side of the route, because anything I did to try to catch him or cut a corner, I just wasn't going to beat him to that location. And so I only got to do about half of today's route, plus an urban adventure through the center of Berlin.
Few places scream Cold War Berlin quite like Tempelhofer Feld. So as I make my way through the airport turned public park, let's check back in with Johnny to find out if David Hasselhoff really did bring down the Berlin Wall.
After World War II, Berlin was destroyed, and of course, so was the Ringbahn. Rebuilding infrastructure was of course a priority, but so was building housing, setting up a new government, starting a new country. I mean, you can imagine in the mid-1940s with the Nazis defeated, there's a lot of different priorities. So complicating... What are you doing?
Doing the run around the Ringbahn.
You did the run already, right?
I know, but they don't know that.
Yeah, you're wearing jeans! Anyway, complicating matters was the division of Berlin. The Soviet Union in the east, America, Britain and France in the west, and the Ringbahn ran through each of the four sectors, meaning everybody's got to get together and talk about how much they like each other and how much they want the trains to work. And so this led to like a pretty weird situation actually. The company that was responsible for running the Ringbahn was called the Deutsche Reichsbahn, right? This is a much older name, the Imperial Train Service. And the headquarters of that company fell into East Berlin, but there's some kind of crazy agreement between East and West Germany that are founded in 1949 and the four occupying powers that meant that the name of this company couldn't be changed. And so East Germany, who wanted to distance themselves from Germany's imperial past as well as its Nazi past, still had to use this name, Deutsche Reichsbahn. It also meant that when West Berliners bought S-Bahn tickets to ride not just the Ringbahn but other S-Bahn lines, they were funding the East German state. And the East German state was really keen to get their hands on Western cash, Western currency, and so, hey, this felt like a pretty good deal for them, but not for the West Berlin government. After the building of the Berlin Wall in 1961, the West Berlin government would implement a kind of boycott of the S-Bahn, trying to encourage people to not really use it. And so they used to have posters inside the stations or nearby that would say, "Keine Pfennig mehr für Walter Ulbricht." Walter Ulbricht was the leader of East Germany, and he's the man that famously said in the spring of 1961, "No one's talking about building a wall." And then a couple of months later, on his orders, the Berlin Wall was set up.
Running around, along, or better yet, through the scars of the Berlin Wall is something I never get tired of. For me, it's a reminder that anything really is possible, no matter how unlikely it might seem in the moment. I mean, I sincerely doubt that my parents, my World War II veteran grandfathers, or my Jewish grandmother would have ever imagined their own flesh and blood living in Berlin someday. Yet here I am, 5 years in with all 16 ways to say the in German basically memorized.
And so at the end of the 1980s, the Berlin Wall came down. There were scenes of great celebration, and at the end of 1990, Germany reunified. And then began the difficult task of reconnecting two different cities, two different countries, two different political systems, and of course, two sides of the Ringbahn. And it took a little bit longer than you might expect. The tracks and the trains are already there. They've been running throughout the entire Cold War. It wasn't until December of 1993 that the first trains started to run on some of the Ringbahn tracks, but it took even longer than that for the whole circle to be reconnected. That happened in 2002, more than 10 years after Germany had reunified. Of course, most Germans know this already. Berlin never got the memo about German efficiency. But the Ringbahn is a much loved, sometimes not so loved, part of life in Berlin. It wouldn't be Berlin without the Ringbahn. The Ringbahn has been connecting Berliners with Berlin for 150 years, and Berlin wouldn't be Berlin without the Ringbahn.
Out here now in Tower Park, home stretch. That wind's not helping, but I got less than 10 to go. Single digits. According to my watch, I got just about 10 minutes to go. But holy hell, it's my left hammy talking to me. But I'm on a good pace to get this thing, so just get through it. There's a metaphor in there somewhere. I'm too tired to figure it out. That's 1 kilometer to go. We can get there, folks. We're gonna get there.
And get there we did. Down the steps of Prenzlauer Berg and right back on the platform where I started a few hours earlier.
I'm gonna go so tells me to stop. Alright. So, now what?
This is the part where I suppose I should do some kind of sentimental wrap-up, tying everything together into a perfect, neat little bow. But a perfect, neat little bow isn't any kind of Berlin I know. The Ringbahn is just one example of the wildly messy and complicated history you can find here that continues to play out today. Nonetheless, this city has become my home. And for better or worse, as JFK famously once put it, Ich bin ein Berliner. I am a jelly donut.